Hello, I'm Steve Maskery. Welcome to Workshop Essentials. Well, I finished all my curved templates. They're all nice and smooth, and I've drilled a few holes in them. They're not in any old place. They're where screws or bolts are going to go in the finished chair so they don't spoil the end result. So I've got a couple there and one there in the arm, for example. So how do I go from a rough sawn piece like this was just jigsawed out of a much bigger board. How do I go from this to this perfectly finished piece that's identical to my template? Well, it's quite simple. We use the template and I've countersunk both sides of this. And there's a reason for that. It gives me a certain amount of flexibility. If, for example, I could only put it on that way, you can see that I would end up with a knot in the finished result. And I don't want any more knots than is absolutely necessary. But if I turn this template over, like that, you can see that the knot suddenly disappears. And so by countersinking on both sides, it gives me more flexibility about how I lay this out. So I've got a couple of small screws. These are 35 by 20s, and I just want to ensure that there's the tiniest amount of clearance beyond my template. There we go. And so that's nice and secure. And I'm going to use two workshop machines to do this job. I'm going to rough it out over on the bandsaw and then flush trim it over on the router table. So come with me. If you come round there, I'll get a better view. I'll show you what to do on the bandsaw.
Oh, this is embarrassing. It would appear that I've deleted the main bandsaw scene from my camera before downloading it. Plonker Maskery. Sorry about that, folks. You'll just have to make do with this voiceover instead. I'm using a notched single point fence like this, which is clamped to the bandsaw fence in such a way that the blade itself is inside the notch by 1 or 2 millimeters or so, a 1/16 of an inch, say. The template then runs against this auxiliary fence, leaving me with just a wee bit to trim off on the router table.
This is the setup on my router table. I've got a fairly chunky flush trim bit. It must be, at least 16 millimeters in diameter. And it's got a bearing top and bottom. So I can use it high and use the bearing at the bottom when I want to have my template against the table. Or I can have it low and use the bearing at the top when I want to use the template on the top face. And in that way, I can make sure that I'm always cutting with the grain, and I shall end up with a much smoother finish and hopefully with no tear out. So with the bearing at the bottom like that, you can see that it's just dead center on my template. Now, if I cut this part with it like that, I'm going to be against the grain all the time, and that will rip it up. So I'm going to use this bit for the top, where I'll be going with the grain, and this section of the curve here. So all this is going to be done with the template against the table and using the bottom bearing. And then I shall lower the bit and turn it over and use the template at the top for the rest of the leg. The other thing is, you'll notice that when I feed it in, I'm resting the back end on the fence, and that gives me some support while I lead it into the bit. Perfect. And I missed that end when I'd got it high up. That needs to be done at the top. I've cut out all the profiles for my curved components, but that doesn't mean that they're finished. The two braces that go at the back have to be cut at an angle on the inside edge. So this is the upper one. So this is going to go between the two the arms where they meet at the back. And it needs to be set at an angle of 30 degrees on the top one. The bottom one is only 6 degrees. So I've set my adjustable head at 30 degrees, and if I put that against the curved edge, you can see that there is a gap here where my finger is. And I've measured that gap, it's about 11 millimeters. So, to get my angle, I need to measure back 11 millimeters from this edge and then just run a pencil line all the way along the inside edge like that. And then, all I've got to do is to cut this away using a spoke shave and check as I go along that I'm maintaining my 30 degrees. And I've got to do the same thing with the smaller one at 6 degrees. Okay, so that's a job for this vise, I think, and I need to work in from both ends so that I don't rip the grain up. Ooh, that does feel nice, I have to say. Not bad, Steve. Not bad at all. Very good. Well, I've finally profiled everything that needs to be profiled. I've done all my straight bits. Everywhere that's going to be screwed has been counterbored first. So I've drilled a 10mm hole about a third of the way through. and then I will drill through with a clearance hole for my screw, which is going to be 4mm, and a pilot hole of about 3mm into whatever's I'm going to screw into. And so these are looking rather nice now. I've chamfered all the edges on the router table, and that's looking, once that's sanded, that's going to look very clean indeed. But the side members, the bits that go down to the ground at the back, these are curved, and it's not so easy to do that on the router table. Sure, one side is going to be fine. It's going to be with the grain all the way. But the other side is going to be against the grain all the way. So rather than risk ripping it all up, I'm just going to do it with a spoke shave, just a couple of passes. And that way, apart from being a lot quieter and very satisfying, look at that. Smooth that up a bit, I think. Give me a bit more room, that's better. And I can go with the grain every inch of the way. And that is very nice indeed. So now we can start thinking about screwing all these pieces together. So I've now got to do the same with all my other components, and then it'll be ready for assembly. So that'll be the next time we see each other. So thank you very much for watching, and until then, enjoy your workshop. Cheerio!